time again here on The Harsh Truth as we go over Season 2 of the series Downton Abbey. Here to do that with me, as always, is the Dowager Countess, Lady Cora. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm great. Anything Downton Abbey, I'm there for it.
A fun show, and I'm glad that you're here to talk about it with me because you appreciate the show just as much as I do, so we can talk passionately about it. Let's get right into it. Downton Abbey Season 2 saw war affect the Crawley family and affect all of Europe, and it got really into how it affected everybody involved, upstairs, downstairs, and everything. So, Lady Cora, why don't you give us a bit of a synopsis on what we saw in Season 2?
Sure. The second series, or season, depending on which continent you're on, comprising of 8 episodes, but in addition to that, there was, quote, the Christmas special, which, fortunately for us in the United States, we got it back to back after episode 8, but if you were in the UK, you had to wait a fair bit between the end of episode 8 airing and the Christmas episode airing, so yay us. Well, the storylines take place during the time period between the start of England's involvement in World War I through to the 1918 Spanish influenza pandemic, which has been talked about more since the show aired. The season begins with Matthew Crawley, now an army officer, and several of the servants of Downton Abbey being sent to fight in Europe. As the English casualties become known and injured soldiers are returning home, Cora strongly resists Isabel's suggestion that the largely empty Downton be converted into an officers' hospital. But finally, the decision is made to move forward with the idea. And I believe they just did the first floor. Isn't that right, Frank?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. On a happier note, Branson confesses his love to Sybil, and she finally returns the feelings. Matthew returns injured, possibly unable to have future children, and because of that, he sends away, breaking off his engagement to a really lovely lady named Lavinia to allow her to go on with her life. And it was also because he was in a wheelchair, I believe, and he couldn't walk, and that really demeaned his, masculinity.
Yes.
Whatever. William also returns to Downton, and his injuries are very serious, and he will not recover. And we'll talk about it later, but he was madly in love with the kitchen maid, Daisy. So to ease his suffering and give him some peace of mind before he dies, Daisy agrees to marry him, granting him this one last wish. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bates, that woman, makes a visit to Downton and threatens the family that she will reveal a dark secret. Shortly after her visit, Mrs. Bates mysteriously dies, and Mr. Bates is accused of the crime and arrested, leaving Anna very upset. Eventually goes to trial for the murder and is found guilty and sentenced to death. When the Spanish influenza epidemic comes to Downton, first Cora is stricken, but she recovers. And then Lavinia, who has refused to leave Matthew, also becomes ill, but unfortunately she dies. Matthew is filled with guilt after her death because before she became ill, Lavinia witnessed a romantic moment between him and Mary. But in the end, after some time, on the Christmas special, Matthew proposes to Mary and she says yes. So, begins with war, ends with the prospect of the marriage that everybody wanted in season 1.
Everybody
and in this time period, it's like this summary that we are sharing doesn't touch on some characters that come to play that we should talk about. Jane and Carlisle that are really not so great people. But yeah, there it is.
Well, let's start with the war. I mean, the war is obviously what kind of dominates the vast majority of this season.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we talked about it in the last breakdown we did for season 1, how they not only just incorporated the fact that these things happen in the real world, but they did have a great effect on the characters in the show, upstairs and downstairs, and how the story progressed going forward. I mean, because obviously some people were lost. Thomas was greatly affected, being injured, albeit kind of self-inflicted in a way. So yeah, I found it really staggering how brutally honest this show was during the wartime of this series, and how it can affect even an aristocratic family like the Crawleys. It's like nobody's immune to war.
Mm-hmm.
There is no amount of money, there is no amount of power that can make you immune to the effects of war and the devastation that it can bring at so many levels. And I think they did a great job of proving it in a very classy but very honest way over the course of this season.
Did you also enjoy how well done and realistic the few scenes we saw of them at war were, like in those trenches, and the costuming and the environment? That, I mean, it felt very real, almost like Hollywood Saving Private Ryan level of accuracy.
Yeah,
the war scenes.
It was very good. It was a very realistic portrayal of all the things that so the pictures that I've seen, the reading that I've done about World War I. It seemed very accurate. Few people understand what it's like to really have explosions going on around them and having bombs go off and bullets flying. But it's even harder to kind of capture that on screen, really, whatever movie you're making, because bullets make a different sound when they're fired at you than what they make on screen. But when you can capture that on camera, it makes it visceral. The best war movies make those moments very visceral. You feel like you're there. You feel it in your bones. You feel a little bit of fear. And the few war scenes that we actually got, because, I mean, let's face it, not all of season 2 could take place in the Somme, but the war scenes that we got were very, very well done. And I thought Julian Fellows, who was we talked about in the last episode, is a very, very much a historian and is very read up on these things, made those very realistic and very, very good.
Yeah. It just was very impressive. And even the parts of the season where Downton is the convalescent hospital, basically, you almost forget that it's the house sometimes, because it feels like a hospital. And it's very impressive how they have this amazing home, and they can just, with a few changes, make it feel like a hospital. It was very well done. Very well done.
I think the whole thing also kind of went to how humble, we talked the last episode about how the Crawleys are very humble for being aristocrats. They know their place in the world. They know that they have a larger obligation to people. And even though this was a huge infringement on their privacy, a huge infringement on their way of life, they kind of sucked it up, because they were like, this needs to be done. So as annoying as it was to have all the convalescing officers around at times over the course of the first probably 60-70% of season 2 deals with the war, having all these people around, you can see on their faces, and all credit to the actors for acting this way without having to really give it any dialogue at all. They understand that there's a bigger thing that they have to do here, as much as it may inconvenience them and the way of life that they're used to. I thought that was very well done too. Again, very subtle, very subtly portrayed. It's on the look that Robert has in his face from time to time. It's things like that.
It's the fact that he's wearing a uniform while he's in his own home helping with the hospital. He's not even, it's like, and how Sybil takes on being kind of like the, maybe this isn't the right word, but the family ambassador to the hospital staff and the hospital itself. Little things like that are great details. And her diving into this experience of being, a true wartime patriot, helping with the hospital, further kind of puts her on her own track, like I was saying in the last episode, of her kind of going on her own path, being separate from the family in some ways. And the dichotomy of daytime Sybil working in the hospital to evening in an evening gown at the table with her family is very interesting to me. The subtleties there they're not really subtle. It's just very different Sybil's, and I think almost kind of help her decide to take the steps she takes later on in the season, and builds her bond with Branson because she relates more.
And something that gets overlooked a little bit, as it occurs to me, is Edith becoming kind of the morale officer of all the convalescing officers. She really finds a place, and I think she's in many ways humbled, and gives her a different perspective after being.
But I think that's all a setup, because when Patrick comes back burned, how else would she have interacted with him to, one, talk to him, let alone, you know, realize it is him.
Well,
And the
story
fight.
wise, absolutely. But I mean, just as far as her character development
Oh,
is
yeah.
like that. I think that experience of being that kind of morale officer for these guys, it really was a big step for her growth over the course of the series, because she
Hmm.
kind of comes out from that still very much at odds with Mary for so many reasons, but she comes out of that, I think, a little bit changed too, especially after the thing with Patrick Gordon, who we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. It's a very good point because she does. It's almost like she's starting to find her own voice
Yeah,
through the war experience. Because, you know, as a woman of nobility, there's no way that they could have any other place in helping. I mean, what, maybe going down to the village and like putting packages together to go on a train or something. But other than that, it would have no exposure to it.
yeah.
So,
Also, it gives us easily the most hated character in all of Downton Abbey. All the seasons, the one movie that we've gotten so far, and the movie that's going to be coming up at some point this spring, Richard Carlisle. Boy,
oh my
do you hate that
God!
guy from the jump or
Yes!
what?
Yes! And because the thing is, when you first know Mary in the first season, this is the guy you think she deserves, okay? Then because of him in this season, and okay, Mary started to soften for me because of him. So he did serve a purpose for me. How he treated her was that man. I'm speechless because he's such a fucking ass. Just because you have money and you're a rich American, you have control of newspaper. He makes me think of like you know, a Bill Gates type who doesn't have any. Well, I'm trying to think. Oh, no. Who's the guy who runs Amazon who's a total douche?
Bezos.
Yeah, Bezos. He's Bezos back then. Rich, he has power. He doesn't give a shit and doesn't really do much for anybody else. And yeah, he wanted Mary because he wanted the access to the nobility. And he didn't care what it cost or what. The fact that he was like trying to steal Carson and was taking over another manor, and just the little things like, you know, they're looking at this house, right? And he's like, well, why don't they have this? Why don't they have this? Oh, these houses should have power, and every bathroom should have plumbing. And it's like, you don't understand these old houses. Yes, you're nobility, but you live in an older home. He didn't even respect the house, okay? And the house doesn't have a beating heart. So if he doesn't even respect the house, how do you expect him to be a kind person? I know it's a weird thing to notice or point out, but
Well,
he has no respect.
He's just a very hard person. I kind of understand him. I don't like him, but I kind of understand him. He's one of these people that's like, I've got all the money in the world. I don't have to be uncomfortable. If there's something I can do to make my life a little more comfortable, I'll just throw the money at it and do it. And you understand that, but I mean, some people just don't have that ability to balance out comfort with need, with emotional comfort. It's like some people don't know how to balance that, especially when you get to the point you got so much money you don't know how to count it all. You become a little bit detached from everybody else's reality. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I understand that he's this guy who wants to move forward. I mean, electricity is a big deal. Not even, I mean, even Downton Abbey doesn't have electricity everywhere. I mean, it's like it was one of the things I laugh at because it dates the show really, really badly this season is the addition of a telephone to Downton Abbey. It's like nowadays we have, you know, telephones right in front of us all the time in our pockets, whereas, you know, back in the you know, 19 in the teens, in 1910 and 1920 in that area, having a telephone in the house was a big deal. It was like you had to be rich to have one of these things. So I mean, even that, it's like, why wouldn't you have these comforts if you can afford them? And that's the kind of guy he is. But again, like you said, he doesn't know how to balance the the emotional needs of himself with his materialistic stuff. He's one of those people.
He thinks of everything as a possession and a conquest.
Yeah, and
he doesn't actually relate to anybody or give anything other than a price to get something he wants.
Yeah.
He doesn't actually build relationships.
Yeah, and the interesting thing and why he is important to Mary's growth is that she kind of needs him. She needs to find somebody who has a heart that is so much colder than hers and is made of pure stone. Because even though Mary can be kind of a bitch throughout this entire series, she's not a bad person. She just doesn't always understand how to be empathy.
She was sheltered and naive.
Yeah, empathy sometimes escapes her. It's usually very poorly timed. It's like sometimes she has it, but it seems like when she needs it the most, it's just not there for her at all. But she kind of needed to feel like she was always going to be alone to find somebody, and this was her in a relationship sense kind of hitting rock bottom. She's like, well, I got to marry somebody because it's what my kind does, and it may as well be this guy because he's got a bunch of money, he's got a title, he can do, whatever. It's a marriage of convenience. It's gonna be, whatever.
I think she liked he wasn't going to try to he would let her be an individual. I think she couldn't have love. She wanted to just, run a household, and she didn't want to have to fake being in love. And I don't think their relationship was always very transactional.
Yeah.
And so she was thriving on the unavailableness of his emotions to just be able to keep trucking on in life. Because I think she was really struggling with Matthew being with Lavinia. And if she can't have Matthew, she doesn't want love. So she might as well have a rich husband who's just going to, buy her what she wants and let her run a household. And keep Downton going, so... But then his cruelty, I don't know. I mean, he did. When I think of what was redeeming about him, I struggle because I don't think there was any redemption or anything that he did that was. The only thing he did was put a mirror in front of Mary's face saying, You think you're all a hot shit and you're a great person. Well, guess what? You're just like me. And you don't like what I look like. So here's you.
Sometimes a person isn't redeemed. Sometimes they just play their part. Like I said, that's kind of the purpose of his character is to, like you said, hold that mirror up to Mary and say, this is your future. So you can decide right now, do you want to turn away from this life where, the guy's rich, he's going to make you really comfortable, but you're never going to feel loved. You're always going to be in an environment that is not going to be good for you. It's going to make you a worse person. Or do you go ahead and say, what, screw this, I'm going to go ahead and kick it with Matthew, which, isn't really an option at this point.
Because he was going to marry Lavinia, but yeah.
But this shows her, she's like, look, you have a choice. You can either find happiness and take a hit in the class or whatever is important to you, or you can go for all those things that you feel are important to somebody of your stature, marrying someone who's with a title of sir, going through these motions because you have to. Mary never seems to understand until the last season that you can find this balance of what you want and what's going to work out well for you for your status, and it's okay. She's so bent on maintaining this aristocracy and maintaining her partner and all that she's willing to give up on love because she can't have Matthew. She kind of pissed that thing away. And
that's Violet. That's the Violet in her.
Yes, again, that's that shadow that I talked about in the season one is that she's trying to live up to that.
Well, look what's coming in the new movie. Violet, we don't know yet because we haven't seen the movie, but there's this illusion that she was in love with this Italian man and they had a dalliance, but yet she ended up, married and had the life she did, and she never spoke about it. So it's almost, Mary's mirroring this idea of, aristocratic responsibility that her grandmother, likely, passed down because that's all she had to cling to herself. And we'll find out when we watch the movie what that all means, but it'll be very telling. But back to the season, yeah, Mary, and then this, I mean, and again, Michelle Dockery, I believe you said,
Yeah.
Even just the subtleties of how she plays Mary in the moments she's with Matthew, with her dad, with Carson. But then when she's in a room and she's alone or talking to Carlisle, completely different Mary. I mean, it's just a tonal shift in her body language and her voice. Just very well done. Yeah.
This is definitely the roughest part of the road of the journey for her character. Because it feels like, well, second maybe to the death of Matthew, which really kind of wiped her out. But this is definitely one. I mean, it's one of the most important parts because
very much so.
You feel like she's kind of given up. She's like, you know what, I'm just gonna go ahead and throw myself to the wind, and whatever happens. I just got to play my part for the family and for the Abbey and just whatever. This is what I got to do. So she just kind of resigns herself to whatever fate throws at her. Like I said, in large part because she doesn't know how to strike that balance between what your heart wants and your responsibilities to the aristocracy, to the family, to what your family needs you to do to carry on the
line.
And
it's bad when at some point in the season, I don't remember which episode, Violet and her own dad go, you don't have to do this. He's kind of awful. You don't need to marry this man. And even those two, the people who literally built up her character that got her to this position, are telling her you don't have to do this, and she still does it.
Well, in her response to that, I forget if it was the conversation with Violet or with her dad. She even said, she's like, "What else can I do?"
Yeah,
I'm completely resigned to the fact that I'm going to be stuck with this jerk for the rest of my life because that's what we do. That's what I have to do to secure the family. So on, so on. I have to marry this guy. I have to produce a son, or well, at that point, Matthew's the heir. But she's like, I got to marry this guy. I've got to play my part. I'm just going to do it and get it over with. And even though I'm probably going to hate myself for the rest of my life, that's fine because that's my responsibility. That's what I got to do. That's my part that I play. So she at this point has kind of given up. And I think it's important. I think it's important for her because you got to hit rock bottom sometimes to figure out how to find your way back up. That's kind of the old expression. And I think this was really her hitting rock bottom. I mean, the stuff after Matthew passes away, notwithstanding, I think this is her personally kind of hitting that rock bottom and just saying, you know what, whatever. And she eventually finds her way out of it all.
And the thing about Carlisle is that it's not enough that he has Mary and that he's pretty much taken over a family in subtle ways. I don't know if you caught that too in the season. He kind of commanded the room even over Robert in family settings.
He did it over Cora. It's like he is maneuvering Cora, and she's like the one person over the course of this series who's like, she's not that easy to move. It's like she might knowingly give a little here and there to kind of make things work out the way they ultimately need to work out. But I mean, he's maneuvering her. Which was really shocking because that's really the only time over the course of the series that anybody does that to her.
Yeah, because even in the first season, when you see the dynamic of Cora and Violet before they come together to try to fix the estate issue, she can't, even after being married to Robert for all those years, she never let Violet get to her. But then Carlisle comes into the family, sort of. And he just manipulates everybody. And then it comes even down to the downstairs folk. Thank God Anna doesn't, go for it. But, he has Mary. He's got the family under his thumb. And that's not even enough for him. And so when he goes to Anna and basically tries to say, well, I need you to tell me things that Mary doesn't want me to know and spy on her, blah, blah, blah. That to me told me, Mary thinks she has a picture of what her life will be like with this man, but she has no clue how bad it could get.
Yeah, and again, this guy's got so much money, he thinks he can just buy his way through everything. It's like, oh, she likes Carson, she wants to have Carson around. Hey, Carson, how about I throw a bunch of money at you and you can be our butler? It's like, hey, Anna, I need to know what she's doing. If I throw a couple bucks at you, she tell me all of her moves. It's like the guy has no heart. He thinks he can buy his way into everything he wants.
He doesn't respect the family in knowing that Carson runs Downton. So by taking Carson, you're completely changing everything about Downton and disrespecting your future in-laws. There's no respect. And so this man is everything a man should not be.
Oh, yeah. And the sad part is, it's like, I think Robert and Cora specifically, they both kind of just back off and let it happen, because they're like, we understand where Mary feels she is. She's going to make her decisions because she's a grown-up after all. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we don't really want her doing this. We don't. Really
Let's be honest. After the whole, man dying in her bed and the drama of all the suitors coming and going, I think there is a sense of we don't want to have to handle this shit anymore. We have 2 other daughters to think of.
Yeah.
And trying to have another baby at the same time and running, the estate and the village and everything that goes with that. And I don't think they address it in this season, but I think there's a tiredness of having to manage Mary's life.
Yeah.
So he's the answer to them too. And I think that maybe, just maybe, is why Cora lets him keep a thumb on her, because he is stopgap solution of Mary's bullshit not affecting her day to day.
Well, that, I think at this point it's kind of leaking out a little bit, the whole thing with Kamal Pamuk.
Yeah.
So she's like, I've got to get her married now, even if it is this absolute tool bag of a human being, because if this slips out anymore, nobody's going to want to talk to her at all,
or marry the other 2.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, it is odd how he comes in and just kind of starts running the show, but it's a layered response. It's a layered reason as to why they kind of allowed this to go on as long as they did. Obviously, Matthew's otherwise occupied with fighting in the war, and he's got his own fiancée, Lavinia, who we'll go into here in a second. And then, Robert and Cora are dealing with, the house being the convalescent center, their day-to-day obligations to do what they got to do and stuff like that, and wanting to make sure that Mary is set up in life to where she's going to at least be comfortable, if not happy. So, yeah, I mean, you kind of understand it. But yeah, he is easily the most hated character in this entire series, from episode 1 to the final episode.
Thomas is a close second for me.
Yeah, at least Thomas had some kind of vindication towards the end. I don't know if you could have vindicated. I don't know if there was any real vindication that could have come for Sir Richard Carlisle.
None.
I mean, he does kind of at the end
of it all. Does Dave Rose say it's cinder block treatment?
Yeah, whatever. There's probably a few bodies floating around the Thames. You never know, but but yeah, I mean, I do kind of like the fact that in the end, when his entire arc is done for the season, he does just kind of walk away. He's like, you know what, let's leave, let's part classy. Mary shows up down there. She wants to see him off after the whole tussle between him and Matthew, and he finally gets fed up with it all, and all the other stuff that happens, him trying to buy off Mrs. Bates's wife. He just kind of is like, I'm just going to go ahead and walk away from this whole thing. I guess that's really the only vindication you can really have.
Let's admit it. He was saving face because he's still unmarried at this point, right?
That is a big part of it, yeah.
They're a noble family. They know everybody. It would not take much for them. I mean, yeah, he knows stuff, but still. He doesn't want to ruin a reputation he has that could affect his future marriage.
True. But, yeah. I'm really glad that he only lasted for the one season. It's like
6 episodes in all.
Yeah.
Of 9.
Now, I will say the guy that plays him, though, why am I drawing a blank on his name?
Ian Glenn,
that's right. He's a fantastic actor. I've seen him in everything from the Resident Evil movies. I've seen him in some other stuff. He's a fantastic actor. Look, you've got to be a good actor to make everybody hate you. I mean, you've got to be a good actor to where it's like you spit 1 or 2 lines of dialogue and people are already like, screw this guy.
He was one of the good guys in Game of Thrones, though, playing Jorah. So yeah. He kind of probably liked the idea of being the asshole. So who knows?
Playing a villain, playing the bad guy is a hard thing to do, and some actors just don't try it because it's difficult. It's hard to make people love you. It's even harder to make people viscerally hate you. It's like, but this, like I said, 2 lines of dialogue, and you're already like, yeah, I'm not with this dude. I'm not with him at all. But yeah, he did a fine job playing it, and again, it was a very important part of Mary's growth as a character throughout the series, because this is where kind of emotionally she just hits rock bottom, and this was the lesson she needed to learn before finally getting engaged to Matthew.
And it's not just rock bottom, but she finally got a reality check.
Yeah, she needed to be humble. She needed to be broken a little more. She needed to be broken in the right ways, and I think the relationship with Carlisle did that to her. It kind of helped her come to this self-realization of, I need to approach some things a little bit differently in this stage of my life. And she finally does. She finally figures it all out, and then eventually her and Matthew get engaged.
And I think the one good thing she did learn with her relationship with Carlisle is they had very frank, open conversations. They did have good communication. I mean, he would be saying things like, I know you love Matthew, but, he's with Lavinia, so what the fuck are you going to do?
Yeah.
Okay, this, I'm going to squelch this story and save your reputation, but what are you going to do for me? And they would be very... So I think she learned from that some good things that going into her relationship with Matthew, and even later on with her subsequent husband. I think it was things she learned from the relationship with Carlisle. It's okay to be this blunt and still be in the relationship. You don't have to hide things.
Yeah, you also learn a lot about... He sees everything as a transaction. I think they even said that at one point in the series. He sees everything as a transaction. So when he does buy this story from Mrs. Bates to help out Mary, he even says to her, "You're obligated to be in my debt. As my wife, you're obligated to be in my debt." Because she says, I'll pay you back whatever you had to give her to keep this thing under wraps.
He didn't buy it for that. He bought it for the power over her. He doesn't give a shit about the money.
Yeah, he didn't even really care about protecting Mary as much as he thought, I have this valuable secret that I can use as currency over Mary.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even like I did it because I care about Mary. It's like I did it because I want this to hold over her. This is something of value that I can use later on down the line, not something that I'm doing because I actually care. And you learn a lot about him through all that.
I think he was saving it so that if they had gotten married and 5, 10, 20 years from now, she finally got mad about him, I don't know, having affairs, which I'm sure he was already doing at this point. All he would have to do is put in his newspaper. And then he would have grounds for, oh, I can't believe I married that, She did that before, she wasn't a whole woman when I married her. I'm done with her, to deflect from whatever scandal he may or may not have going on that she would be playing off of. So he's one, like you said, the most disliked person in all of Downton. And he had I hate to say this, but I don't think the show or Mary would have been the same without it, because there are other ripples here that came from this. Carson realized how much he likes to be at Downton.
Yeah.
And his loyalty to the family because of the temptation of being pulled away. It really showed his bond to Mary. He thinks of her as like a surrogate daughter almost. And you see that vibe when they talk in other parts of the series. But very much more so in this season. And you see Anna's loyalty and how, aside of that, you also see, like you said, how Cora herself cowtail to somebody for the first time. That was different. And so you see a dimension to all these other characters that you may not have seen. So it's not just about marrying Carlisle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he comes in and upsets the apple cart in a big way. But now we've talked about one of the most hated character in this entire series. Let's go to the one that you had trouble not liking. She's so pure, Lavinia Swire. I
know. She's everything Matthew deserved. That if honestly he had never been, pulled to be the new heir, and he just would have met Lavinia in life, he would have been married and been very happy.
Yeah,
he never met Mary and none of that.
At no point in this series does Mary ever deserve Matthew. It's like
Agreed.
she is so lucky that that whole thing ended up working out and he ended up marrying her. She never deserved him once this entire
Thank you,
series.
Julian Fellows.
Yes,
Um,
Lavinia is the one that deserved absolute happiness. I hate to say that she was done dirty. That her character was. It's just really unfortunate how.
but she did walk into the fire twice.
Yeah.
She knew what she was getting into, and then Matthew tried to walk away, and she refused to leave his side. And she still didn't. She knew Matthew was in love with Mary, so she died on the sword emotionally long before she got sick. So she has to take some responsibility for that when we look at her character. But good, bad, or ugly, she's a really good person. And you always wonder if I don't know. I think that Lavinia is a beautiful character, and I think he could have played it differently, not had her killed off, and had Matthew marry her and Mary end up with the guy she did.
I've always thought that Mary was jealous of her in two ways. One, that she was going to marry Matthew, and at that point she was just kind of like, oh shit, I should have had that when I had the chance, but she screwed it up. And also, it's that I think Mary sees in her the kind of person that she always wanted to be, but just circumstances never allowed her to grow into that. So she's jealous, not just that she's marrying Matthew, she's jealous that Lavinia is like a legitimately pure good person. That she doesn't harbor the bitterness that Mary carries. She doesn't carry the stress in her life the way that Mary carries stress in her life. She just has this mental makeup that Mary wished she had.
Didn't she have like a really great relationship with her parents as well? And
yeah,
and everybody adored her. And Matthew didn't fight his affection for her because he saw how good she was. And it's also a good lesson. Every show has, or movie has the token person who deserves the best outcome but gets the worst.
Yeah.
And she's the one in this series for me.
Yeah, I also thought it was kind of interesting that like part of Mary kind of giving up to whatever fate was going to bring her wasn't just marrying Carlisle. It was because she had plenty of opportunity to try to at least throw a wrench in this whole thing between Lavinia and Matthew, but just didn't. Like the news about her giving the information to Carlisle a long time ago about shit going on in Parliament and things like that, and people owing money to people and so on and so on. She could have thrown all that out there and kind of like used that to kind of like to muddy the waters a little bit and make Matthew question whether he wanted to be with her or not. And she didn't. She backed off. And I think part of that was because the good part in Mary that manages to overpower the bitch part of Mary, it really did trump the rest of it all in that moment. She's like, you know what, that's not the right thing to do. If you're going to accept your unhappiness with Carlisle, you need to in turn accept his happiness with Lavinia.
I think it also was the start of the redemption of her character.
Yes.
In the way that she wanted Matthew to be happy enough that she didn't want to make it harder for him to be happy.
Because she does finally have this love for him. Yeah,
yes.
That's exactly what she was trying to do.
Yeah.
But so sad the way things go for her. It's like because Lavinia's got her own little journey she has to go on through the course of the season, because for all the amazing qualities she has, bravery isn't necessarily one of them. It's not that she's not brave, she doesn't know how to display it. She doesn't know how to every now and again kind of, puff a chest out and then go headlong into a problem and just with a brute force attack like something like Mary or Violet would do, just deal with the problem. She's not necessarily that kind of a person. She's a little too kind-hearted. But but the fact that she hits that moment after Matthew sends her away, after Matthew's very badly injured and may never walk again, may never be able to have children, he sends her away to live to live a better life than what he thinks he can give her, and she finally finds that inner strength to say, you know what? No. Now, granted, it was some of it was at the behest of Carlisle. But she does kind of have that epiphany where she says, you know what? No, I'm going to do this. You're going to deal with it, and this is how this is going to be. And she finally manages to muster up a little bit of that bravery inside herself to deal with the situation. And I thought that was a huge part of her individual growth throughout the course of the season. One that I really like seeing. I like it when characters like this who are really kind-hearted will sometimes ball up their fist and punch the bully in the face. Those are great moments. And she did it, and it was done in a very classy British soap opera aristocracy kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still badass. I mean, because I love when people act with their eyes. I love Cate Blanchett because she acts with her eyes. She changes one thing about her eyes, and the scene changes. Like everything, the tone, everything changes. There was a look on her face that changed from that little, sheepish little girl that first walked in when Matthew introduced her to when she walks into the room, and Matthew's like, "What are you doing here?" She goes, No, dude, this is different now. I'm here. You're going to deal with it. I love you. You love me. We're going to do this thing together. I don't give a shit about anything else."
And if it wasn't for the flu, they would have already been married.
Yeah, and the look on her face changed in that moment. I was like, damn, that's what I'm talking about. That's when you have one of these moments as a person where, like visibly you look different. And I thought she portrayed that beautifully in that moment where she says, "No, this is how this is going to happen. I'm going to look after you for the rest of your life, and you're going to love it." And I was like, okay, you got it. I'm with you on that one.
Mm-hmm. It reminded me of Sybil's bravery to, go be with Branson.
Yeah, Sybil, oddly enough, Sybil's like the only character in the show that always seemed, well, other than maybe Violet, that always seemed to have her shit together. She always knew what she wanted. She was always just going to go and get it.
Well, can you blame her? She's the youngest. She's watched Mary.
Yeah.
Bro, she's seen it all.
And not
she's
just
like,
that. I mean,
that's not what I'm doing.
Yeah, she's seen Mary have all her troubles. She's seen, was it the sister? Why am I drawing a blank? Edith. She's seen Edith go through all her problems. She's just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to go do my own thing. I'm not going to do what either of these people are doing. I'm just going to do my own thing. And kind of under the radar, she just makes all her life happen without anybody even really noticing the whole.
I could totally have seen if Sybil had lived and stayed on the property and Matthew had married Lavinia, those two being best friends. I could totally see that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The people's there.
But very.
Are we going to talk? I was going to say, do you think we'll talk about Ethel and Jane? Because those two characters were.
Oh, we're getting there.
Okay, cool.
We're getting there. Not so much Ethel because whatever, but Jane certainly because that is a very important thing. I'll go ahead and get to it now. It was very important to see that in this season through that whole storyline between Robert and the maid Jane, where they kind of had this almost romance that almost gets there but doesn't. It's very important to remind yourselves that even the heroes are fallible. That nobody's perfect. Yes. And we spend the first season, Robert is kind of he's the head of the family. He's the solid rock.
He's in love with his wife and they're very happy. But it wasn't always the case.
But the stresses that have come from the war, from making Downton into a convalescent home for officers, him not being accepted into the military for active duty the way he had hoped. I mean, the stress and the anguish that caused him, all these things going on around him. I mean, it's you have to see that there's a point where even the rock like him starts to crack, and that was the one crack that it shows throughout the course of the series, that reminds you that he is every bit as human as everybody else. Mm-hmm. And I really like the way they handled the whole thing because. He can stop this, but he's kind of falling into it a little bit more because, I mean, let's face it, he's a guy, he wants some attention. He's not getting any from his wife because she's so wrapped up in this thing. This cute maid, Jane, pops in and gets hired, and she's throwing eyes at him because she's a nice person. And it's not like she angles to steal him away. It's just it's the circumstance that happens. You don't always control who you fall in love with. So... It is just kind of a circumstantial thing if these two people end up in the same place at the same time, even though they're from
because of this places. You get a taste of what, and you learn more about the beginnings of their marriage. I mean, he wasn't crazy in love with Cora at first. It was a marriage of, it was for and he did fall in love with her, but not at first, and. I don't know.
Well, that's how the marriages go in aristocracies. Is you might get lucky enough to fall in love with a person you marry over time, but generally speaking, when you walk down the aisle, it's more of an arrangement than it is a marriage. Now,
Yeah,
if
and
you're,
so
like
I
said,
feel
if you're
bad for
lucky, you fall
Cora,
in love, but at the same time, it doesn't always work that way.
and when Cora finds out about it, oh, it's like gut punch, you know.
Does she really find out though?
There's an inference, you know.
I
There's a
know.
look, an exchange that where they don't talk.
I know. After the whole thing with the art dealer that comes up a couple seasons from now, but I think that what I don't know that Cora was necessarily alluding to a specific instance, but you
Okay.
got to think that at that time it wasn't uncommon for even high class males and
Yeah.
everybody really to have a thing on the side. It was almost
Expected.
it was almost expected. Let's face it. We've talked about marrying Richard Carlisle. She
Hmm.
couldn't have expected him to be faithful. It
No.
was a rarity at the time. That's just kind of the way things were done. As off putting as it seems to us now, because we've evolved kind of past that. Well, most people have anyway. We've kind of evolved past that as a society. It really was kind of the norm back then. So
No.
so when she says that, I don't think she was alluding to a specific thing. Certainly not the thing with
Okay.
Jane, but just the fact that that's how things went. And
Okay.
Robert kind of understands, even though over the course of the series he does stay faithful and all that. He doesn't fall into the trappings that so many other people did. That it was something that was prevalent at the time. So I think Cora just kind of assumed, she's like, dude, you've gone and done your thing at least once. So glass houses and stones, the whole thing. But I thought that was a really interesting path to send Robert down, because like I said, the stress
You
is gonna get to
humanize
everybody.
him.
It does.
He's not just the figurehead of the family that just comes down the stairs and sits at the head of the table.
Yeah.
And it was good, I think, that they included that. So that was something that I liked about the season myself. I did not like the death and the war stuff, but it it was reality in this time frame.
Well, it was
And I
honest.
did it. Yeah. Yeah.
They
And
didn't gloss over it either. They said this war had an impact on a lot of things, especially in Europe, and because it was real. A lot of the houses that existed like this back in during World War I in England, a lot of them were affected just like this. Some even to a much greater extent than what is even portrayed in the show. So to give a taste of that, I think was a very honest and classy way of portraying exactly how this affected some of the houses like this, in the time period. But one of the people that was injured and came to Downton to convalesce was somebody who we thought was dead. Now,
dun dun dun.
yeah, as we talked about in the last episode, really the whole thing that brings Matthew into the Crawley household is the fact that the heir to the Earl of Grantham was lost aboard the Titanic, and his name was Patrick Crawley. Now, oddly enough, somebody named Patrick Gordon asked to be brought to Downton to convalesce from his very, very serious wounds that he suffered while fighting in World War I. And he says, hey, by the way, my name is actually Patrick Crawley, and I forgot who I was for a long time because I was severely injured on the Titanic and lost my memory, but then I just suddenly got my memory back in true, soap opera fashion, which I thought that part was a little goofy, but I was like, whatever, I'm going to go with it because...
Didn't he serve for another country's military?
Well, the story as it goes is that when he was rescued from the icy
to
waters
Canada?
after the Titanic, he ended up in Canada because...
Yeah.
For anybody who has done the research, the people who were rescued from the Titanic, they were taken into New York and to parts of Canada once they were brought back to land. He ended up getting taken back to Canada, and he had no memory of who he was, so he just kind of blended into being a Canadian citizen and started a new life because he didn't know any better. And then whatever injury he suffers while he's fighting in World War I apparently triggers those memories to come flooding back, and he remembers that he is actually Patrick Crawley.
Because he's burned, nobody can see his face.
Yes,
and there's no DNA.
He is very badly disfigured from his wounds suffered in the war. And he says, "Oh, by the way, my name's Patrick Crawley. I want to go to Downton."
Edith, remember that moment when she looks into his eyes and she actually sees it, and she's like, "You are Patrick." And I think he was done so fucking dirty. I'm so mad that scene when he's walking away from Downton and they never bring it up again. And Edith just lets it go. I'm like, even to this day, it still bothers me.
Part of me thinks that Edith wanted to see it because let's face it, she's like that.
But you don't really think it was him?
I don't know. That's the thing.
Oh, I'm convinced it was.
That's the thing that always kind of got to me about this whole storyline is because if he is actually Patrick Crawley, this completely changes at the genetic level everything that's going on in the story up to this point. So it's like, and they even talk about it after this becomes knowledge amongst the family that if this guy is actually Patrick Crawley, that Matthew is out as heir, this guy is going to be the Earl of Grantham once Robert passes away, and it drastically changes everything that the family's got going on. So
I think they shrug it under the rug, and I think they purposely sent him away.
Because they didn't. The fact that they only did this for one episode and didn't give us a clear answer one way or the other, and left
they stuck it in the middle.
Yeah, it was so.
They didn't even. It wasn't climactic at the beginning or the end of the season. It was just like, oh well, amidst everything else going on, here's this, which could have been a whole season of content.
Yeah, the fact that they just kind of threw that in there for one episode and then pulled it back, they were like, nope, we're not even going to give you the real answer. But yeah, I think part of it is that Edith wanted to see Patrick Crawley and him.
Oh, I assumed it was him.
But that's the thing, is it's left open to interpretation. It's like, was it him? Wasn't it him? We're not going to give you the answer. We're going to kind of let you figure it out. We're going to let you come to your own conclusion, which sometimes is fun. But... Okay. They definitely just left it all out there, and I was like, wow, how do you put that? Should have lasted for more than one episode. That should have been at least a 2 or 3 episode thing. Now him ultimately deciding, you know what, I'm not a part of this family anymore. They think I'm dead. They've all moved on without me. Maybe this life that I've created for myself in Canada is just the best thing I can do now. And he takes a very pragmatic view towards it, and that's why. And at the end of it all, after a 2 or 3 episode arc, he decides to go ahead and leave. That would have been cool, but just like putting it there for one episode and pulling it back out, I was like, "Whoa! I want to explore this more because this is a serious situation that you just put the family in."
Yeah, I still struggle with that. If you can tell from my tone of voice, he was done dirty, and I don't like it. I almost wish they would have cut it out altogether. If they're not going to explore it, fucking leave it in the books. Don't put it on the screen. I mean the Bates stuff was fantastic content in this season. I mean, the fact that John Bates shows up and he's so mysterious, there's something coming. I mean, and I do think it's supremely important and not an accident that he is the first character we see in the beginning of the show. On the train, like I said in the last episode. I mean, I think this is maybe one of Julian his favorite characters from the way he wrote him. It's just in that moment where Bates, has to tell Anna everything, and it's just this character is so beloved by me. Everybody can see something of themselves in John Bates, and I'm still so upset about him, facing his death and being convicted. That I cried when I watched that for the very first time, him getting convicted and sentenced to death. I cried so hard. So
yeah, this is really one of the biggest doses of pure drama that is kind of injected into the show as a whole, is Bates's arrest after his wife
Estranged wife is really the title I really want to give her, but
the estranged wife. After figuring out that there's not really much she can do to bother him anymore and to put his life on hold the way she had been trying to do. So she decides to kill herself in a way that kind of frames him up for a murder that obviously he doesn't commit. But that whole dynamic of him being in jail, him having just married Anna because they kind of saw it coming. That whole dynamic I thought was actually really, really good. It gave, after the war ends and we kind of go through the flu stuff, it's like you need something that's going to carry the drama for a little while. And Bates going through all this stuff, being arrested for the murder of his estranged wife, I think was probably kind of the perfect way of doing that. Again, it also kind of highlights how legal systems all over the world have.
That's a good point to bring up. It's a very good point to get a picture of what the judicial system was back then.
Because
And
essentially, it's like she's dead. He's the husband. He did it. You're guilty. And that's almost literally how the trials went at that time. There wasn't much by way of evidence. There wasn't much by way of character witnesses or any witnesses to crimes or whatever. It was just like we're just making this assumption, and the judge is like, your assumption makes sense. We're gonna go ahead and call him guilty, and that's it. Yeah, it was a very wild ride. Also, a lot of the stuff happens. A lot of the stuff happens when Bates is in jail, so he's not there to be that kind of that kind of support for Robert, because him and Robert obviously have a relationship that goes back to Robert's time in prior wars and his service in the military. They served together, and that's one of the reasons why he even.
We're there for Anna.
Yeah,
all the stuff with Carlisle and Mary, because she was all she had was Mary at this point in her job. And so,
Mary's going through all the stuff that she's going through. So, and when you're going through stuff like that, it's hard to be a good friend to other people.
Yeah, Anna is I think Anna is overlooked a lot as one of the stars of the series. Kind of because she just blends in a little bit. She's John's wife. She's she's under Mary, but she really is part of the glue that holds everybody together. I mean, all the shit that goes on with Thomas.
Anna is quiet strength.
Yes, thank you. I was trying to find. Yes, yeah. I think that's on all the stuff with O'Brien and Thomas. I mean, she helps people be redeemed, and I wish I would have seen her and Daisy be closer friends, but I understand Miss Patmore was kind of that person for Daisy, but I could have seen a different iteration of the show where Anna and Daisy were close as well, but it's okay. I mean, it turned out good, but
yeah, Anna is definitely the quiet strength kind of for a lot of people. I mean, not just for John, her husband, but also at times for various people. I mean, there are times where she even has these moments where she connects with Thomas. And every once in a while you see a crack in his facade, and it's usually Anna that's there, and he does seem like in those brief moments that happens maybe once or twice a season that she manages to get through to him and kind of keeps him from going like way over the edge and being a total dick. But
it's like she wears a halo out in the open, and everybody knows she's good people, and that if she thinks something's bad, it's probably bad. And so she's kind of like a moral compass, in my opinion, for the downstairs folk. Yeah, and for Mary as well.
Oh yeah, and you definitely see that a lot in the conversations that she has with Mary when they're in Mary's room. It's like she bounces these ideas off Anna because she knows that Anna's kind of the honest broker. She's a kind-hearted person. She's going to be honest, but at the same time give it to me in a soft enough way to where I'm not going to feel like she's punching me in the face with it. You know what I mean?
And in this season, I think she's a big reason why Mary's able to walk away from Carlisle too.
Oh yeah,
be open to Matthew.
Yeah, because I think that when she asks Anna things about Carlisle, the fact that Anna is so standoffish and is like, I don't even want to talk about this dude, I think that's something that eventually sinks into Mary. She's like, well, even Anna doesn't want to talk about this guy. So that's just one of the signs that she gets that's like, maybe this guy's really not what's best for me. But a whole lot in this season. I mean, war, the flu, big life decisions being made. Matthew walking away from the prospect of even being with Mary. Unfortunately, of course, Lavinia does pass away from the flu. The flu definitely has its impact on the house. I mean, Carson gets it, Anna gets it, Cora gets it. Cora very near death, and is one of the things that kind of pushes Robert down the path that he ends up going with. Trying this little side relationship with the maid, but eventually pulling himself back from the brink and saying, you know what, this shouldn't happen. This isn't good for anybody. I have to be the bigger man, which I think was just a great way to show that even under great stress, good people will do good things in the moment. And I think that he's that one little, like the way he reacted to that whole situation. It's just telling you, you know what, humanity has some hope. It has some people out here like this that when faced with these decisions will do the right thing. They are out there. The good guys
Yes.
do exist, and Robert Crawley is one of them. But,
You know, losing a baby is a big deal.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, and you know, the whole thing with Branson and Sybil, that must have been hard for them, you know, to deal with their daughter running off and marrying the chauffeur. Between losing a baby and essentially losing a daughter to what they think is going to be, you know, social ruin, they're dealing with a lot.
Yeah. But that he's aware enough to say, you know what, I've got to maintain who I am. I have to maintain the example that I set for this county, for my family, for the people that are close to me, the people who look up to me. I have to maintain this, not just outwardly, but inwardly. Because, I mean, while Mrs. Hughes seems to have her finger on the pulse of everything that's going on in the house, it seemed like nobody else knew what was going
does
on.
have a lot of blind spots. Let's be very honest.
Yeah, she does. But while she seems to know what's growing between these two, nobody else seemed to have any clue what the hell was going on.
Right.
So he, as far as he knows, is in this position where I can do this and get away with it. But he's like, you know what? No, I have to be a better example for myself. Even if nobody else is seeing it, I have to make the right decisions, because if I make one wrong decision, then the next wrong decision is going to be easier. The next wrong decision is going to be easier after that, and the next thing you know, he's Sir Richard Carlisle. Or he's
and Mrs. Hughes. Mrs. Hughes knows she really has no business telling him anything.
Oh, yeah.
But she can keep Jane in her place, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could have gone way different.
Yeah, a very wild season from start to finish. So many things happened that really set up some of the most significant things that would come in the next couple of seasons, and of course a couple of things that reverberate all through the rest of the series, like Matthew's injury. I mean that really drastically changed the trajectory of a lot of characters. I mean, for Mary, not Edith, but Lavinia, Richard Carlisle. I mean, it drastically alters the direction of all these characters and where they're going.
Yeah.
But yeah, a really crazy, insane season. I mean, war has an effect on things. It makes things so much crazier than they would be any normal time. It's nothing.
Let's be honest. Sybil would not have run off to marry Branson if the war didn't happen, in my opinion, and she hadn't been working in the hospital and had that separation from day-to-day life with her family to have it not be missed.
I think Sybil was always cut from a different cloth.
No, but I don't think she would have ended up with Branson.
I feel like that probably would have happened anyway. Maybe it would have taken a different form.
Okay.
It would have taken a different path. But I think that Sybil always wanted something different.
Okay.
Now, because Mary wants high class stuff. She wants to be, whatever. She wants to be important in society. She wants to be the socialite. Edith craves what Mary has because she's the middle child, and that's what middle childs do.
Do you think they would have run off though, or do you think they would have tried to convince the family about accepting him and having the proper wedding and blah blah blah?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think it would have happened eventually, but I think the war, if anything, probably stalled it. I feel like it probably would have happened faster had there not been. How long did World War II last? World War I lasted, 3-4 years? Something along those lines? 20,
it was 19 to 22 or 23?
Yeah, something like that. So I think the fact that Sybil wanted to put all that stuff on hold till the war was over, it means that it probably kind of put things on hold. Their relationship probably would have grown probably a little bit faster, I would imagine, were it not for World War I breaking out, putting the kibosh on really a lot of people's plans. But a really crazy, insane season. A whole lot goes on. We learn a lot about Mary over the course of the season. A lot about Matthew. We get introduced to one of the purest characters. I really wish would have stayed around for a while, but I could see why she couldn't stay around for a while, because she would have gotten in Mary's way, and that was Lavinia. I like I said, I feel like her character was done dirty, but it's also fitting. It's unfair. Maybe not dirty, but it's unfair, because good, pure people like her I think they deserve happy endings, and she didn't get it. She didn't get it at all.
That's the point of the Spanish War, I think. They're trying to exemplify how so many people's lives were cut short.
Yeah.
The historical side of Julian Fellows, not the, romantic side.
In both the war and with the Spanish flu epidemic that pops up immediately afterwards. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that happens that drastically changes the trajectory of characters like above stairs and below
Yeah.
in downstairs.
I mean, the struggle that Daisy had in, I don't want to marry him, I'm not in love with him, but he's dying and he's crazy in love with you, and the whole widow thing, and how he taking care of his dad and having and him wanting to have a daughter, if he can't have his son. I mean, there's something really beautiful about that storyline, and I think it gets foreshadowed quite a bit, but it is one that you kind of really think is quite, I don't know. I connected with it emotionally.
And Daisy being kind of young, she's not emotionally mature enough yet to deal with these things entirely correctly. She doesn't deal with them badly,
Right.
But she is definitely not experienced enough in life yet to be kind of like a little more like Mary, a bit more pragmatic when it's necessary. Everything is dealt with at an emotional level rather than a thoughtful one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I really do feel for William. Again, I don't think he was done dirty, but man, it's just really unfortunate because him and Lavinia, they were just such good people, and it's so unfortunate that good people are often the ones that get taken young.
The dad, William's dad, is such a great guy, and I like how he also ends up shaping who Daisy is in later seasons. So that was heartwarming as well. That bond was formed.
Yeah, her growth over the course of the series is kind of a slow burn.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of get it because she's not a primary character. She's not one of the family. But her growth over the course of the series was really a slow burn. And towards the end, especially after she meets, what's his name? The guy that she'll end up marrying eventually, the footman. Yeah.
I forget his name, too.
Yeah, we'll get to it eventually. He doesn't pop up until very late in the series anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's like she kind of goes through her whole arc. I think it's easier to kind of relate to her than it is really to anybody else because like I said, we're all working class stiffs. We probably put ourselves in her shoes a lot more easily than we can put ourselves in the shoes of somebody like Matthew or anybody like that. But yeah, there's again, this show is so character driven. It's and all the characters are very, very good for very different reasons. I mean, it's even though you hate Thomas for the vast majority of the show, his character fits in so well to everything that's going on. It's very well written, very well acted.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Rob James Collier is the guy who plays Thomas.
His character is one that you hate to love.
Yeah, you do sympathize with him, even though he's an ass. It's like some people aren't assholes because they're assholes. Some people are assholes because they're situations. They've had a rough road, and it gives you some rough edges. So it's a little hard to, it's a little hard to be a nice person when you feel like you've only ever felt despair and anger and things have never gone your way. So yeah, it's a very well acted series from everybody. But yeah, season two gave us a whole lot. And really shaped where this entire series went from season 3 onward. And it was a really important part, again, making everybody fallible, from Robert to Cora. I mean, everybody's got this. I mean, everybody gets kind of exposed in this season in one way, shape, or form. And it does help you realize that these people are human.
Yeah.
You see these people in a very different light moving forward. But yeah, a very exciting season. I think season 2, I could probably go as far as to say it's my favorite season of the entire series.
Really?
It's yeah.
Interesting.
Season 3 is good. There is a big shift in the tone of the series after Matthew dies. And the series is good, don't get me wrong. We'll talk about that when we break down season 3. But season 2 is my favorite because of all the angles that it takes. I mean, I talk a lot about Aaron Sorkin being a great writer. What Julian Fellows did with this story is mind-blowingly good.
It's his baby. It's like the guy who created Mad Men from start to finish, inside and out. He knew when it was going to start, when it was going to end, and just magic. Creativity magic.
Yeah, he hit
is the phrase I got.
He hit so many strong notes this entire season. And again, the way he doesn't just mention history, he actually works history in to these people's lives and shows how it affected the people. It's just great writing, great acting all around. I would go as far as to say that season 2 is my favorite season in the entire series. There's so much going on.
I don't know what my favorite season is. I have to think about that before we talk about the next one. So, yeah. Huh.
But anyway, any final thoughts on season 2 as we start to wrap this thing up?
I know that... No, not really, because the hardest part about walking away from season 2 was not knowing what was going to happen to Bates. And that left... Waiting for that was hard. Yeah. So, yeah.
But we'll talk about how that all works out in season 3. But anyway, there's our breakdown of Downton Abbey season 2. Thank you guys for coming along with us for the ride. Hopefully we're not boring you with our talk about British soap operas, but it's a really, really fun show that Cora and I both enjoy. This is really one of the things that we bonded on and we met. And I'm very, very glad that we did, because again, this is a great show, great writing, great casting. Everything works out so well for the show. So if you can get past the fact that it's a British soap opera, I think you might get a kick out of it. Because again, and also if you're a kind of a historian like me, you'll get a kick out of watching this as well, because it is very, very good on that point. But thank you all very much for joining us. On behalf of the Dowager Countess Lady Cora, I want to thank you for hanging out with us, and we'll see you guys when we break down season 3. Adios.
Bye.